Even use my proper glasses.
Hello and welcome, Omni Dogs and Omni Kittens, to Omni Dogs Vault Crime Corner, where today, in addition to my co-host Taylor, we have a very special guest with us, Greg Rucka. Greg, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to do it.
And we have an interesting time in our lives that are happening right now. And right before we got on, we have a typical list of interview questions, but you were saying before the interview that this is a particularly kind of tenuous time to be a creator.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the whole industry is about to take it repeatedly in the nuts. So, and that's going to have a ripple all the way down the line. You know, I mean, what's going on now? We have consumers who, even if they have the income, aren't going to be able to get product, right? Because Diamond is not going to be shipping as of the start of April. So the whole chain, right? Everything is going to back up. And that means for creators, you know, we can sit here and I can write every script I want, but if I can't, and for most writers, it's different, right? Because it takes less time in theory to write a script than it does to draw one. But if an artist can't get paid, then the book's not going to get made. And if the book's not going to get made, then it's not going to get out there, and it ripples. And this goes all the way through, man. This is going to hit, you know, this is hitting printers, it's hitting publishers, it's going to hit the retailers, it's going to hit the creators, and it's absolutely going to hit the fans. And the fans are going to be caught sort of going and coming, right? Because on the one hand, you know, what were the unemployment figures released today? Were 3.3 million in the last week went on unemployment. That's a lot of people. You know, and discretionary income, and as much as we might feel that comics are a life or death pursuit, you know, they're ultimately discretionary income, you know, and if you've got to decide between feeding yourself and clothing yourself, or worse, you know, having to pay medical bills and then picking up the latest issue of Lazarus, I don't think there's much of a choice there, and I don't fault you for backing the family play, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, we've been trying to encourage viewers and people on our comic book page that we have to support their local comic book store and order through places like In Stock Trades if you have that kind of money, if you still are employed, because these new books aren't coming out, but you can still buy existing stock.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, as people who love this medium, we can't afford to see the direct market die. You know, there have been some creators out there, I think, who I think are misinformed and have said, like, well, you know, if this is the death of the direct market, so be it. But, you know, the relationship, it's funny. Portland had Comics Pro was here in February, right? And I was asked to sort of give like an opening welcome to Portland speech. And one of the things I said, and I'd written this very careful speech, right? I mean, I really wanted to say something. And then, of course, you know, I'm delivering it and I'm just went off the map. But one of the things that struck me, and I was talking to a room full of retailers from all around the country and in some cases from around the world. There were retailers from South America, retailers from Australia there, right? You know, and I found myself saying, look, I don't have a career without you guys. Like nobody knows who I am without you. I am beholden to that relationship. If the stores collapse, you know, nobody reads my stuff. My stuff doesn't get out there. And we can talk about digital distribution and so on, but the digital distribution model, at least as it's translated to mainstream comics, not for web comics specifically, right? But for people who have been working traditionally print and so on, it's not favorable to us. I don't make a profit there. You know, what I get off of Comixology sales is negligible. It really doesn't move the needle. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look, the deal there is, in my opinion, usurious. It is, it was a deal cut very early. And, you know, they're getting a huge piece of the pie, but the people who actually make the books aren't. So
That's important to know. I don't think people knew that.
Yeah. Look, I'd much rather you read my stuff than don't, right? And if the way you're going to get it is get it digitally, by all means do. I have no problem with that platform. But in terms of the ability for me and Nicholas Scott and Michael Lark and Leandro Fernandez, you know, and the list goes on, to be able to make a living off of that, we can't do it if it's digital only. It's just the royalties and the share we get of that is really insignificant.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about a lot of Greg's older books. So if you have the money, if you have a job, you're getting paid, maybe you could go on In-Stock Trades, go to the curbside pickup at your local comic book store, pick up something like Black Magic, Lazarus, Stumptown, the list goes on and on. Support Greg and all of his other collaborators as well during this really difficult time.
Well, you already you just said the magic words Lazarus, which I don't want to jump ahead and talk about. But I did a couple of years ago, I think at the end of 2018, I did a top 10 that turned into a top 13, and Lazarus was in my all-time top 10. Thank you. I am going to jump ahead and just ask you how, not how it came to you, but the world building that goes on in Lazarus is incredible, down to the signs on the wall and the warnings on the computers.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I wish I could take all the credit for that. Actually, I don't wish I could. I'll be honest. I think in this case it has to be shared around. It's interesting, you know, like the post DC break in 2009 and sort of moving into, I guess, what I now think of as sort of the second stage of my career, which is a lot of these creator-owned books through Image. The collaboration on those books is far more intensive. And so, you know, when we talk about the world building in Lazarus, we're talking about, yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm creating a lot of stuff and I'm extrapolating stuff and I've got my documents and I've got a file folder and I've got all my notes. And every time we move into a new corner of the world, we have to build it out. But there are other elements, you know, especially since we started with Lazarus Risen, where, for instance, Eric Troutman has always, you know, he's a dear friend and I've written with him before and I've worked with him before, but he is primarily a terrific graphic designer. And he's the guy who, you know, he came up with all the interfaces. So, you know, we'll have a POV shot or something. We'll have, say in Risen 1, there's a bit where the insect drones are tagging the targets. And that's Eric is creating all the reticles and building them. And then not only that, but, you know, he'll shoot me a note saying, well, I'm building this design for Carlisle's interface, but I'm thinking the Hawk interface works this way. So there is a level that attention to detail, and that's just one example of it, right? But that attention to detail, I think, is one of the things that makes the world building look, I don't want to say more accomplished than it is, but it demonstrates it, I think, really beautifully, because it becomes immersive.
Right.
You know, Eric had a friend who has since become a friend of mine, a guy named Richard Howe. Richard's another graphic designer, and if you've looked at like the last 4 or 5 issues of Lazarus, now the artifacts are actually being done primarily by Richard. Now, and that's what Richard does professionally, right? This is a guy who designs movie posters. So, you know, we were always pretty proud of our fake ads, but now we've got a pro, you know, selling them. So, I mean, they look really good.
Yeah, I love the back matter of your hardcovers. All the different ads, the posters, everything. It's just
just filling in all that stuff is just
right.
It's a hoot. And I think that's part of it, right? Is that there are all these corners of the world. There was in the Carlisle source book, there was a sort of Netflix-like post interface, right? That had like all the shows available for like a particular evening. And one of the shows is a sitcom called Guns Up. And this was a throwaway. man. This was a throwaway 3-4 years ago. And Guns Up has now taken on a whole life of its own. Like, Richard is fascinated by the show. He's built the whole lore. He has episode breakdowns. You know, he has internecine fighting. He has gossip between the actors and everything. And that's one of the joys of it. You know, I come from a tabletop role-playing game background in a large part. That really does influence my writing. And when you are playing, you know, in a good setting, what you've got is a huge sandbox that starts to build itself, right? That once you engage with it, it is effectively watering the plant. And then all of a sudden you are seeing things and able to go places and to do things that you never thought was possible. And then it begs questions. This is a long answer, but then it begs other questions. Like, I've got 2 friends in Australia who have done work on the source books, very smart guys. Literally, one of them asked me early on, is like, well, how do they trade, you know, stocks? And I literally was like, what are you on about? Right? Like, I mean, what are you talking? Never mind stocks. Why are we even talking about commodity trading? Right. But he came back and he said, well, look, like, Carlisle isn't necessarily going to be able to make a certain kind of widget. They're going to need to get that from Mineta. They're going to need to get that from the Mineta family. There has to be a brokerage. There have to be trading houses. And out of that conversation, because he was right? I had no interest in going there, right? Nowhere in my story was that ever going to be relevant. And yet, through that discussion, it has become relevant, right? By filling in that corner, it's another place we can go. You know, the concept of these traders, these giant arcologies that are sort of mini Casablancas, you know, where there is espionage and cutthroat capitalism, you know, so.
Well, I think you've kind of set up like a pool system where if you want to be in the shallow end and just read the hardcovers, just read the stories, you're fine. But you can also wade in deeper to look at the maps in the back, the timeline of all this has happened. You can do that if you want to. And so you can kind of have that shallow experience and still be entertained, but you can also have that immersive experience and be even more entertained.
That is, that's great to hear, because that is, I think, the ideal, right? You should be able to read it and not have to worry about whether or not you understand what cargo stands for, right? But at the same time, I think you give the reader something when, you know, Risen 4 just came out yesterday. And we spent a lot of time on the dress uniforms, right? The dagger dress uniforms, because the issue begins with this sort of graduation for this class of new daggers, of which Casey Solomon is one of them. And for Michael, and this is the other part of it, right? It's all well and good for me to sit there and go, you know, Bittner troops come over the hill, you know, but Michael's over there going, wait a minute, what do they look like? Right? Because you can't do a Google search for Bittner troops. He's got to design what that looks like.
And I've heard you actually go to the park and actually choreograph all these fights and take video and send it to Michael Lark.
Yeah, that's how we've handled 3 of the Lazarus fights. Is that I'll actually go out and I'll choreograph them. I'm not great at it, and it has its problems, but Michael works very, very much from reference. So being able to sort of provide him the stuff that he can monkey with is very helpful. The problem becomes when we're doing, say, a Lazarus versus 20 people, much harder to choreograph. I'm not sure I know 20 people who'd be willing to come to the park with me and let me swing, you know, my plastic sword at them or whatnot. Yeah.
Bendis and Fraction won't do that with you? Go to the park and swing swords at them?
Bendis won't. Fraction probably would. He actually probably would. I'll keep that in a hip pocket. I think if I'm going to use that, that should be like a heroes fundraiser or something, though. You know, let people come and watch.
I don't want Lazarus to end anytime soon, but do you have a timetable for when you think the series will come to a conclusion?
Yeah, we're now quarterly. Could probably end it in the next 3 to 4 years, depending. The story has always had a shape and it's always had an ending. And the question really these days is how briskly we want to move to that ending, because there's a whole lot of stuff. There's plenty of stuff I can do before I get there. But the arc that starts in July and subsequent to that are pretty much setting up endgame stuff. So we are now starting to pick up some speed towards that ending, but a lot of that I think will depend really on how the book continues to do. And it's incredible. I mean, I find Lazarus is the hardest project I work on, and though I am loath to speak for Michael, that's his full-time job. He's been doing nothing but Lazarus pretty much since 2013. So at a certain point, I suspect he's going to be like, are we done? I need to be done. And there is no Lazarus without him. He is my partner and my collaborator and my co-creator, and this thing doesn't happen without him. So I want to be respectful of his time and effort, shall we say.
Right.
But yeah, you got to figure there's at least, if I really put the pedal to the metal, I could end it in another 4 arcs. It's probably a safer bet to end it in 6 or 7, because then I would really be able to, I think, stick the landing. But at the beginning, there was an end. I always knew where I was headed. So, and we're actually closer to it now than I had realized. A lot of stuff that comes out in this next arc, and you'll see it when Fracture 2 is finished. You will see, oh, okay, this is, all bets are off now. So
awesome. I'm glad we have a lot more coming then.
Yeah, well, at least for a while.
Is there any word on any kind of Amazon TV series on Lazarus?
It is still moving forward. There is a pilot script in. There is a Bible in. There is a breakdown for the season. We are getting notes. And hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be able to say it's going to happen sometime later this year.
Well, Amazon is the place to be for that, for sure, right now. All the money they're able to put into these shows, like
and I think that's it. Is that they've got to gauge. This isn't going to be a cheap show, but I do think if we can get through all the hoops, I think it could be very good. And speaking as a guy who's been really fortunate in the last year and a half, right, to see a lot of my stuff suddenly getting exploited in Hollywood. A lot of the some properties sell, and I'm just like, go with God, do whatever. And other properties I am more precious about. Lazarus I am precious about, and have been from the start. I feel that Lazarus, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. I want to see it done right. To such an extent, frankly, that I would rather see it done right than see it done at all. So,
did you write that pilot script, or was that someone else who adapted it?
No, different showrunner who I can't announce. We had done a couple runs at it, and for a variety of reasons that are frankly boring and also would be impolitic, things had not happened. This is actually like the 3rd run at this. It's interesting because it is really not, in my opinion, that hard a pilot to write, and yet until very recently, like in my dealings, every executive I dealt with wanted to overcomplicate it and make it more difficult. And the showrunner we've got right now, who I really adore, and he's really smart and he's really good, you know, he's written a pilot that is honestly, and he's never seen the other ones, right? He's written a pilot that's 90% identical to my pilot. I mean, 90%. You can't tell the difference. He took the same things. He knows, which speaks to the strength of the core material, I think, right? Is that if he's looking at it, he's going, well, these are the things we need. But that 10% difference may be the crucial 10%. And look, I would love nothing more than to see Lazarus be made as a show, simply because as deep as the world building is, as much as we can do in the issues, we are limited by space. There are characters who have not been well served in the book. And it's just because I don't have the time. I can't give them the pages. So being able, you know, television allows you to go much deeper and also much more broad. So that's a bonus. It allows me to fix mistakes that I made early on and to correct them. You know, the portrayals of characters or characters that I hadn't quite figured out in the first handful of issues. You know, you go back into a pilot and I know who they are now. I can fix stupid mistakes I made. So the ideal is if we can do this thing, you know, we're going to have a show that hopefully will be, you know, as good as the comic and will serve, each will serve the other. But yeah, man, I would love to see it. We've been chasing this one for a while. And it's honestly one of the very few things I've ever sold to Hollywood where I've been like, no, this one I really want to see happen. I really do. You know.
Well, after the cluster that was the series finale of Game of Thrones, we need another epic level show that really fills that void in my heart, because that was the biggest entertainment letdown of my life. So I need Lazarus in this format to really step up and fill that void in my life.
You know, I think one of the things that Lazarus is going to benefit from is that if we get to do it, like, and there are so many ifs, right? If they let us do it, if we get a season order, if we get in multiple seasons, and so if we are able to tell the whole story, we know from the beginning where it's going. We know where it ends. And I think one of the things that Game of Thrones had to deal with was they hit a point where they were out of the source material, right? And so you're asking them to execute a vision that I'm not sure Martin himself had seen the end of. I'm not privy, you know, to all those conversations. Obviously, I don't know what happened. But going into this, at least I am able to tell everybody, no, this is where it ends. In 40 episodes, this is the end. This is the last shot. I know what it looks like. And just speaking as a writer, it always helps if you know where you're going.
And that was my biggest complaint with the current Star Wars trilogy, that they didn't have a plan for where this is going to end.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, having a completed story like Lazarus, like you already know it's going to end, that's going to make that TV show much more successful. And even you said building on the world.
One hopes, like if everything else falls into place, yes, it'll help it. And no, you're absolutely right. Look, they didn't know what they were doing when they did, you know, The Force Awakens. So it's hardly surprising that they get to Rise of Skywalker and they're shoving chewing gum and duct tape over holes, you know. So,
but I think you're right about the TV show kind of filling in the other characters. I think that happened a lot with Stumptown. My wife and I love the current Stumptown TV show, and that's what we're watching tonight. And that's hard because my wife and I don't agree on a lot of TV shows and movies, but she loves this TV show. And I really love what they've done with Gray and with Ansel, because I love them in the comic, but they just aren't able to have the page space because it's mainly about Dex, and there has to be.
Well, that's precisely it. The series in a comic, it's about Dex. So Dex is the focal, and everybody else is in support to varying degrees. You know, Gray is a great example of that. Gray is, you know, and he's fine. He's innocuous in the comic. He's funny. He's loving Dex from afar. He's kind of sad, right? But that's a non-entity of a character in a TV show. You have to, if you're gonna make a character, you know, and name him Gray in a Stumptown adaptation, that guy's got to have an inner life and a history. So, you know, I met Jake Johnson at San Diego Con this past year, and he had just been cast, you know, and he sat down and he was like, just tell me, you know, anything I should know. And I was like, this is what I know about the guy, and the rest is yours, man. Do what you need to do. Because you are getting, but I'm giving you a glass and there's a little bit of water in it, and you now need to fill the rest of it. And I think they've done that really well. I think they did that beautifully with Sue Lin. You know, I think that the extrapolation and elaboration of the characters has been really well done. And it's what it needs to be, because if you're doing serial television, if you're going to make 18 episodes or something, then everybody's got to have their own wants and desires and needs, and you have to see those manifest. And on top of that, every actor, you give them a script, they need to know why they're saying what they're saying, right? They're not just saying it, well, you're just saying this to move the plot along, you know, is not a good note. You know what I mean? It has to matter to them. I'm really I'm fond of so much of that cast. You know, I mean, they are, to the last of them, I think, outstanding and passionate, and I really like what they've done. And I say that as a guy who, you know, in the main has been pretty hands off, right? You know, my name's on it, Southworth's name's on it, and Justin's name is on it. But you know, they're making the TV show. And I view myself as a resource. If they want me, they know where to find me. I will give them notes, you know, when I have a note to give. But, you know, my notes are not, shall we say, whoa, my computer just tried to go to sleep. There we go. My notes are not, shall we say, as crucial as ABC's network notes are. So.
It's surprisingly great for a network TV show. So I was hesitant at first, and I watched them like, this is fantastic. The chemistry is great. And last month we reviewed the Stumptown hardcovers that we have. And I'm wondering, are there any more arcs coming out in the future?
Yeah, Justin and I actually were hoping to get to one at the end of this year. And it's an arc that we knew was going to follow the last one. Like we knew this was coming. So it's really just been a question of time. Mostly for me. I'm going to be finishing up Lois. Lois will be done this week for me. And at that point, I've got a couple other things that I need to get squared away. And then it's sort of looking at my schedule and being like, well, what can I do and when can I do it? Justin's drawing something right now that I'm sort of editing that hasn't been announced yet. Probably, and again, going back to the current COVID situation, God only knows, but I suspect at this rate it won't see light of day until 2021. But once he finishes off on that, I'm hoping to be able to feed him new Stumptown. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I had a question about Stumptown Book 3. It's heavily, well, it's all about soccer and the soccer rivalry between Portland and Seattle.
Yeah.
Does it actually? I'm on the East Coast, so I don't know. Does the rivalry between Portland and Seattle actually extend to intramural soccer games?
In my experience, yes, but like all rivalries, it's tongue is in cheek to a certain point. You know, the derby games, you know, when Portland is up in Seattle or when Seattle is down here, those are weekend events, right? So the supporters groups migrate en masse. There are a lot of things that go on around them. And, you know, the hatred of Seattle is deep seated and long standing, and Seattle's contempt for Portland is the same. But at the same time, you can have a tailgate party and everybody can smile. You know, the problem is, and it's the problem with anything, is people take it too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
That never happened in the comic community.
No, never. Never. I've never seen anybody come to blows in the comics community over a comic book about people in tights. Never. And then, you know, don't forget, look, it's fiction. So I am, shall we say, inflating certain things for dramatic and or comedic effect. So.
And we're both really big fans of the crime genre, obviously, because it's called Crime Corner. And I'm especially really into private eye novels. I know that you are as well. Like, what are some private eyes that really speak to you or that you're a big, massive fan of?
Oh, man. Well, look, I started as a writer wanting to write PI novels. And my first novels were an attempt to write a private eye novel that weren't about private eyes. I didn't actually get to write a proper private eye until we got to Stumptown, right? So this is stuff that I grew up on. I mean, I came of age when Spencer for Hire was on ABC, and I was reading, and that was the golden age of Robert B. Parker, that sort of middle run of the Spencer novels. He was never better than in those books, in my opinion. So I was weaned on those, and then I sort of went from them back. I went to Chandler and I went to Hammett, and then to broader crime, to McDonald and to Leonard. It's funny because in our house, actually, my wife, Jen Van Meter, who's also a writer, is a huge fan of, I kind of want to say, sort of mid 20th century detective fiction. So for her, the trinity is kind of Perry Mason, Nero Wolfe, and Columbo, right? And we have, so this is this interesting fulcrum around which our house works, right? And I hadn't read a lot of Rex Stout until she, started putting these into my hands. But I love the Nero Wolfe novels. The first PI novel I actually read that I remember recognizing as a private eye novel was Stuart Kaminsky's Murder on the Yellow Brick Road. And I'm looking over at my shelves, and I think my copy of Murder, I have this paperback my mom gave me when I was 10. And I don't know where it is right now. I think I lent it to somebody and it has vanished. But, my birthday present this year was my wife going out and tracking down hardcover first editions of all of these Kaminsky novels, the Toby Peter mysteries. And, that was it for me. And then when I got to college, as much as I was writing, I thought that my actual scholarly work was going to be on the private eye genre. So I was studying it, and I was studying it with an academic eye. So that was me reading, a lot of Lawrence Block at the time, because I was trying at that point to read a lot of the contemporaries. And then Pelicanos, and then Lehane, all these other guys who come in. Lehane and I got published, our first novels were published within, I think, 3 months of each other. So these are, it's interesting to me because these are sort of people that I came up with. And looking at how the genre has consistently re-articulated itself. Like, we could have a whole other conversation about the private eye novel, what the genre is, how it's translated into different mediums. The things that make it a PI, make a PI story a PI story, versus not. it used to be, like I said, I grew up on Rockford. I went to Magnum. I had Simon and Simon. And then we hit a 20-year fallow period where there was no PI to be found. We had a lot of fake PIs, right? We had a lot of stuff where we were dressing them up. We had Monk, we had Psych, things like that, but we never referred to them as private eyes. And frankly, they were all detectives with superpowers. One way or another, they all had a superpower. And I'm old school, you know. There's a very, I have said this so many times, I know it gets boring, but there's a very famous Raymond Chandler essay called The Simple Art of Murder. And in it, he is talking about what the private eye novel needs to be. And whether you agree with him or not, you cannot ignore him. And the way the genre has grown, writers who have never read Chandler's Simple Art of Murder find themselves having to answer him, right? It is just simply the nature of the genre. But the core thesis, right, and this is the essay where you get the line, but down these mean streets a man must go who is not himself mean, who is neither tarnished nor afraid. And that's who the detective's got to be, right? That's who the detective is. And one of the things I think that we're looping this back around to Stumptown, one of the things they did right with Stumptown is that for all of the hot dumpster fire of a mess that Kobe's Dex is, she is still the best person in her world and a good enough person for any world. And that's the core. For all the damage that that character has, she sustains in that world. But yeah, look, this is a whole other thing we can get into, and I can literally go for an hour and a half on it, and nobody needs that right now. We get deeper into quarantine, we can talk about Rucka's theory of the private investigator as an American genre, and how Star Trek is the inevitable extension of it.
Oh, I want to get into that then. That would be part 2.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that Dex Perio stands toe-to-toe with those famous PIs. I think she is the 21st century version of Jim Rockford. She is like his granddaughter.
That's the point. I got to tell you, the best thing I saw after the pilot was that I want to say Jeannie. I can't remember her first name. Garner's daughter. Somebody forwarded me a tweet she had put out saying people have been trying to, create the inheritor to the Rockford files for, 40 years. Kobe Smulders is. Dex is. This is the Rockford files. And to me, that's like win. Because that's what it was. When I sat down to create Stumptown, it goes to those questions. Rockford is the PI for his era. He's a private investigator who is recently out of prison, in conflict with authority and the government, has served his country, apparently took some advantage, but was also wrongly, depending on how I'm trying to remember, but was unjustly sentenced, and is a guy who is only trying to survive, and just trying to survive, doing the best he can, right? First season Rockford it takes itself very seriously. It hasn't found its legs. By the time you hit second season, where the show has realized this is far more about Rockford's relationships with the people around him, his relationship with his dad, his relationship with Angel, his relationship with Beth, his relationship with Dennis, the list goes on and on. This is when the show really comes alive, right? And again, you look at Jim, and he is the best man in his world and a good enough man for any world. And you see it, I talk about this too. You see it in the freaking credits of the show. This is a really iconic shot of him in the supermarket, right? and he's holding, you know, the piece of meat that he's gotten from the butcher's counter, and the look on his face is, can I afford this steak? Guess what? That's 1975, 1976 America. He is representative of his time and his place. Government isn't entirely to be trusted. We're post-Vietnam. We're post-Watergate. The economy is precarious, right? We are marginalizing and fracturing. And here's this guy who is absolutely liminal. I mean, he's so on the outside. He doesn't have a house. He lives in a trailer, right? And then you get the Magnum. Now, Magnum is Reagan era America. You know, the joke from A Fish Called Wanda is Magnum. We didn't lose Vietnam. It was a tie. So much of Magnum PI is revising the Vietnam War and the Vietnam experience. And it's this emergence of American power. And not only that, American technical power, right? We've got the PI in this story is living rent-free on on this fabulous estate in Hawaii, driving a Ferrari, all because it was given to him. He just gets it. It's just, he's entitled to it, right? And you know, and there's that shot again in the credits of Selleck in his dress whites, his navy whites, being lit by all the screens, you know, and it's so much America's technical power. And who's the enemy? The recurring thematic enemy? The Russians. The Russians are the bad guys. It's so 80s. It is so, it is absolutely that era, right? It's don't be ashamed to be wealthy. Enjoy it, spend it, you earned it, and we're going to take care of those dirty Russians next. All right? And you look at Dex, you know, when Dex was created, she's created in an America that doesn't know which way it's going. In any number of ways, it's an America that's interrogating itself left and right. In the show, they've made her somewhat carnivorously bisexual. But in the comics, she's sort of bewilderedly pansexual, right? She is a product of an America that is going, what exactly is sexuality again? Right? At any given moment, I'm not sure who I'm attracted to. At any given moment, I'm not sure what I feel about these things. Here's somebody who has tried to do well and tried to deliver service to her country and now has to take care of her brother. And she's got to take care of her brother because the country can't, you know, the state can't. The Private Eye novel is always, and the TV show, whether you like it or not, these are always, by definition, they are works of social commentary. They are always commenting on the society around them at any given moment. And the best works acknowledge that engagement, but they don't hit you over the head with it. And the worst ones just wander around bumping into shit and ignore it. Stout is a master of this. You know, Stout would write these Nero Wolfe stories that have no immediate political relevance and then will come out and do, say, The Doorbell Rang, which is entirely about J. Edgar Hoover's abuses within the FBI. I mean, he builds a case around an actual book. The book is called The FBI Nobody Knows. It's a real work that was published that basically laid bare all the dirty dealings and blackmail that Hoover had been engaged in for all that time. So Stout's response was, guess what? Nero's going to have a case that's going to touch on this. And again, all this goes back to the Chandler. And now I've talked about it for 20 minutes. So you guys want to talk about anything else?
That was fascinating for me. So I'm very happy to hear your answer.
Well, neither of you guys glazed over entirely. So
no,
I'll take it as a
not at
good
all.
sign.
We're both crime fiction guys, so what you're saying definitely gels with us.
Absolutely.
And we're both big fans of Black Magic. That was my favorite books of last year, that hardcover that came out. And there's
coming back.
Yeah, this June, right?
Yeah. Nick is actually finished. She's drawing issue 16 right now, so we will have the next 5 in the can. So 4 of the next 5 will be ready when the first of those 5 comes out. So the next arc pretty much done, and this one's a little different, you know, because Black Magic wears sort of this this overcoat of crime drama, but I don't think of it so much as a crime piece. It's much more a story about this woman's relationship with not only her history, but the legacy that comes along with that. And honestly, it's about responsibility. One of the things that I think really attracted me when I started getting into it, and I was doing all my research into witchcraft and into Wiccan practice, was the idea of the threefold reed and then the frankly Hippocratic oath nature of witchcraft / magic, you know, which is first do no harm. Ultimately, do what you like, you know, as long as you don't hurt anybody else. There is a responsibility at play in black magic, and one of the things that is at work for Rowan is that she has pretty much consistently denied her responsibility with regards to who she is and what she can do and what it means. And because she has denied it and because she has ignored it, other people are now exploiting that and exploiting her. So, you know, Black Magic was always pictured to be basically a 3-act story. There was going to be 3 10-page sort of large arcs, each of those arcs broken up into 5 issues. And this is the first half of the second arc. So things is going to get a little hairier and a little darker. So, But yeah, I'm excited that it's going to be coming back. I know a lot of people have been like, "Did you finish? Is it over?" It's like, no, it's not over. People were asking the same thing when Michael took his vacation on Lazarus. They were like, "Is it done? Is it done?" I was like, "No, there's a mini series over here. We're still putting stuff out, guys. It's going to come back."
One thing that both Taylor and I noticed is you create very realistic and relatable, strong female protagonists. And is there a personal thing? Is there a reason you're drawn to such strong female protagonists? Do you feel like they need a voice, or what? They always seem to be very capable and flawed but likable.
Well, I mean, I have no interest in perfect heroes.
Right.
I did my graduate work at USC, and my thesis was the first Kodiak novel, and my thesis advisor, I remember, said to me after he had finished it and said, "Very good, and I'm giving you honors," and so on. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give this to a literary agent I know, and he's going to tell you why you're never going to be able to sell it. Nobody wants to read about somebody who makes mistakes. And I remember sort of sitting back, and this goes back to the private eye thing, right? Of being like, wow, that is a remarkably generational thing to say. This man was 25, 30 years older than me. And he saw Atticus, you know, who's the character in the Kodiak novels. He was like, you should be more like James Bond. And I was like, like, I grew up in a world where the Challenger exploded one school morning, you know. I grew up in a post-Watergate world. Bad things happen. People screw up, right? Heroism is not making no mistakes. Heroism is answering your mistakes and owning them and trying to do right. That, to me, and this was very generational. So, you know, when we talk about the women I write, look, people have been trying to unpack this for years, and I can't give you, I think, a simple answer to it. I know that at a certain point I realized, simply because of my own social awareness and the way I've been raised and the way I was educated, is that if you take a lot of the tropes of any genre, and you change the protagonist from a man to a woman, all of a sudden those tropes look very different. A femme fatale means a very different thing to Dex, right, than to Rockford, right? And that's, you know, that's a rich vein just from a writing standpoint. It'd be like, well, I'd be stupid not to use this. So that's part of it, right? Is that automatically I was like, oh my God, you can do so many things here. There's some really neat stuff to interrogate. The second is that I genuinely like women. I have probably, you know, for all of the ostensive butchness of me and maleness of me, I've probably self-identified with more women than men. So that was, I think, a comfortable place for me to go. But the flip side of that is that when I actually sat down to go, I really want to do this and I want to do it right. It was for a novel I wrote called Shooting at Midnight. It took, for me, it was hard work. It was literally having to go back and reevaluate every single assumption I was making in my writing. Because if you're writing in first person, you are by definition writing in character, right? So again, back to the private eye novel, in most private eye novels, you are dealing with a narrator who is not only an active participant in the story, not only the reporter of the story, but they are also a character in the story, and their ability to relay their character to you comes through the narration, right? Atticus's ability to walk into a room and say, you know, it was a nice room with off-green walls. Books were pouring off of the shelves like, you know, water off of a tap. Bridget Logan walks into the same room and she says, you know, it was a home office painted in, you know, baby shit green. And the bookshelves showed a lack of care and a notorious distrust of detail that I found off-putting. Now, each of them have drawn that you get something about the characters and how they describe the room. Which of those descriptions of the room is true? Which relator can be relied upon? At what point is the narrator unreliable? You get into all sorts of really interesting questions there, right? In Shooting at Midnight, Bridget is an unreliable narrator, and she's an unreliable narrator because she is a heroin junkie, and she is in recovery. But she's a junkie, and she is trying to keep the extent of that illness from the reader, right? That dependency. Oh, okay. Atticus is very much a straight shooter, right? He is and aware of his blind spots. He is, I think, as a reliable narrator, far more reliable. He is also very, very hard on himself, right? So you get a different read there. So when I sat down to do Shooting, right, and I was, okay, I'm writing, it's one thing to be writing a POV of a guy who I can identify with very clearly. It's another for me to go, I'm going to write a novel in the POV of an Irish Catholic girl from the Bronx who had a heroin problem growing up. Yeah, boy, I better get this right. Because if you hit a wrong note with that, you're kicking everybody out real quick. Mm. But that meant going back and having to ask some really basic questions and really working with both my wife and a friend of ours, a woman named Daria Penta, you know, where I would sit with them and we would play 20 questions about Bridget. And they would grill me, you know, and they would grill me about things that, to me, I hadn't realized this was a day-to-day. Like, I could be aware socially, look, the experience of walking down the street at 3 a.m. is different for a guy than it is for a woman, right? We know that. And anybody who says otherwise is an idiot and isn't paying attention, okay? The implicit rape threat, the violence against women that we all know exists in society is something that women have to deal with every day, right? Most guys don't. Like their nervousness on a dark street is a different nervousness. Okay. But, you know, Daria asked me at one point, she says, does Bridget get cramps? And I remember looking at her and saying, what? And she said, you know, she says 2 days every month, I want to lock myself up in my room and I am weeping, clutching my pillow and wishing I would die. Does Bridget get cramps? And I was like, I have to know the answer to that. It may not ever appear in the text, right? It may be entirely irrelevant to the story, but opening myself up to that, to me, meant, you know, that's asking an honest question. And you have to be able to embrace all of those things when you're writing a person. Gender is an element of character. It's not the defining element of character. And so I tend to get, I don't want to say a little uncomfortable. I'm trying to find the word. I think we need a better way to talk about quote unquote strong female characters, because what we're really saying is a strong character. If I am noteworthy in any way, it's that I am willing to be just as horrible to my female protagonists as I am to my male. Like, I do not, there's not a gender restriction on that, right? I'll beat the shit out of Atticus and I'll beat the shit out of Forever, and each of them will take the same beating, and I will not be like, well, I don't want to hit her, she's a girl.
As seen in the beginning of issue 1 of Lazarus.
Yes. Well, look, I once had a creator not say to my face, but say to an editor, and it got back to me after having read a comic I was writing. Rucka clearly is sexist women. And I was like, well, okay, that's one way to draw a conclusion from what you're reading. My feeling is, no, I am absolutely respecting women as much as I respect men, because I am not pulling my punches with these characters. And the reason you don't pull the punch, right? You pull the punch because you're like, they can't take the hit. That's sexist. That's chauvinistic. Right? You kidding me? Forever can take the hit better than anybody.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to hit her really hard before she notices. So there's a lot that goes into it, you know, and I am, frankly, I'm proud of it. I am proud that I am able to, that I at least have earned a reputation for writing these characters fairly, and giving them the inner lives and the nuance that I think they deserve. And honestly, you know, it's 2020. I've been doing this now. I've been primarily steering to women for a good 20 years. So it's simply a lot more comfortable for me, I think, in a lot of ways.
Do you have a personal favorite? Do you have a personal favorite?
Oh God, no! That's asking me like which of my children.
I assume that might be the answer, but I didn't know if there was a clear.
Yeah, it depends on any given day, man.
Got it.
You know, there are characters that I cannot lay claim to. You know, Kate Kane, Batwoman, Renee Montoya, Wonder Woman. You know, as the question, and just as Detective Montoya, Wonder Woman. These are characters that I love, right? And will almost always be lured back to DC. You know, if they dangle them in front of me, I'll kind of be like, despite maybe even knowing better, right? They'll always get my interest. I am unreasonably fond of all of them. You know, I turned 50 in November, and Lark, for my birthday, gave me a drawing he'd done. I actually put it up on my Instagram, and I was incredibly touched by it. And it is a piece, and it's opposite. Like, you guys can't see it; it is literally behind the monitor here. But it is a piece of effectively eight of quote unquote my ladies. I think is his take on it. So it's Forever, and it's 8, and it's Dex, and it's Rowan, and it's Renee, and I think it's Johanna as well. And they're all coming out of a soccer game. They've clicked onto a Timbers game. And it is, yeah, I mean, it makes me so happy. Because I do look at it and I go like, oh, look, it's my girls, you know?
Proud of.
Yeah, I am. I really am proud of them. And I hope I do well by them. You know, I hope I treat them honorably. And I can add Lois now to that, you know, having spent a year really trying to, and I said this at the beginning of Lois Lane in a couple of interviews. I was like, you know, people are going, what's the story about? And I'm like, there is no story. This thing is primarily a character, what it is to be Lois Lane. I'm more interested in that. What is it to be Lois Lane in this world, to be married to Superman? And, you know, you can't do a story about a journalist in 2019, 2020 and ignore what's going on in the real world. You can't. Which means, what's it like to be Lois Lane, who has this incredible fidelity to the truth and what she believes needs to be said in an era when people are turning around saying fake news to anything they don't want to hear.
Right.
All right. Fake news as the excuse of fake news and I have to speak my truth are the hand-in-hand counterpoints of I don't want to have to engage with you. Right? I have to speak my truth is a great, great excuse for saying, and therefore what you feel and think does not matter. I am more important. You know?
So you're talking about something your big two work, since that's part of what Lois Lane is, a DC book. We have another show we do about Batman. And you've written a lot of Batman. You've written Batman comics. You've written a Batman novel, the No Man's Land novelization. You've written for the Gotham Knight DVD. What, in your opinion,
way back in the day.
Right, back in 2008, I think. What makes Batman so special, do you think?
Well, again, you know, you were talking about he's the ultimate private investigator.
Right.
Look, I think there's a whole other discussion to be had about why Batman works so well. I think Batman, honestly, this isn't meant as this isn't dismissive. I need to clarify that. But Batman is eminently gettable, right? People understand Batman. He's kind of simple. Right? Like you can layer all sorts of stuff into the character and you can find the complexity there, but he's easy to understand. Not only that, he's infinitely relatable, right? We can put ourselves into that origin story very easily, right? We may not be able to put ourselves into the same economic bracket, but we can imagine the trauma that creates Batman. We can imagine being Bruce Wayne at 8 very easily. And coming out of that then, right, it becomes very easy to understand this guy who says, well, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I have the wherewithal to do it. And then we have this idea in Batman that, and you could do it too if you happen to be a billionaire, right? But all it takes is the discipline and the dedication and the money, right? The fantasy is a realizable fantasy. I think the other thing that makes him, to me, work so beautifully is I love good drama needs pathos. You have to have pathos, and Batman is soaking in it, and whether by design or by accident, that sort of inherent sadness to the character has permeated everything around him, so that pathos actually goes to most of his really good rogues. The exception being Joker, in my opinion, but I am not a fan of Joker origin stories. I do not feel they should exist. And I think people who look at Killing Joke and say, but this is the origin, didn't read Killing Joke closely. because he says, I remember it differently every time.
It's multiple quotes.
Not only that, he is you are going to call the Joker a reliable narrator? I mean, of anybody in the DC universe, you're going to take his word for what is true? You deserve what you get. You know what I mean? But Two-Face is another great example, right? Here's a character that at his best, like the worst version of Two-Face is sort of the Tommy Lee Jones movie version where he's flipping a coin to decide if he's going to stab you or shoot you. And it's like, that's not why he flips a coin. He flips a coin because he cannot make a moral decision anymore. He's that broken. He doesn't know if he's a good person or a bad person. He doesn't flip the coin to decide, do I stab you or shoot you? He flips the coin to decide, do I murder you here? Or do I, having found you on the side of the road, give you a ride home to your family and pay to repair your car, right? Am I a saint or a sinner? That's what the flip is. And he can't make that decision anymore because there are these two sides of him at war. Look at that pathos. I mean, oh my God, there is a man in there who knows what is the right thing to do, who knows to be good. And he's at war with this part of him that's like, it doesn't matter. Why? It's not a question of being apathetic. It's a question of you're either good or you're evil. Which do you want to be? And then Batman is facing a man who cannot make this choice anymore and who was one of his friends. Right? If you cannot land a good Batman Two-Face story, you're not trying. You know what I mean? I mean, you're not. And you get, coming out of the animators and Dini and Burnett and Tim saw this, right? The Mr. Freeze origin is pure pathos.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Heart of Ice, that's the best episode of the animated series.
Exactly. If you go back and you look sort of at the text origins for Poison Ivy, and they've gotten away from this too, that origin actually got enormous pathos. They have since destroyed it. Right, but she should be heartbreaking. That the abuse this woman has suffered has led her to a place where she does not view herself as human anymore. That her decision is, I have more in common with plants. They won't do to me what humans did to me.
I love that story you did in Detective Comics with Poison Ivy taking over the main park.
Yeah, about Robinson Park. That's exactly it, right? And her issue there isn't I'm going to punish people or kill. She's taking care of these kids. She doesn't, right? She doesn't. She doesn't feel ill towards them. She feels vaguely protective of them. You can run that course with so many of the characters in the Batman universe, and at the end, it all comes from the place that Bruce Wayne is still an 8-year-old boy who every single night goes out trying to keep what happened to him from happening to anybody else. And every single night fails because he cannot ever be everywhere at once. And for every life he saves up in, the Heights, somebody's going to get murdered down in Tri-Corner. And he will put on the armor every night and he will go out and fight that battle every night. And he will do that knowing what he has forsaken, knowing that he has forsaken a life of comfort, knowing that he has forsaken family, right? He has given up all of these things. This is why when people say Batman and Joker flip sides of the same madness, it's like, If you make Batman crazy, then there is no sacrifice. He cannot have pathos if he's insane. You have to accept certain truths. If you're going to say Batman is a hero, that means he is doing this by choice, not by compulsion. He decides. And when you really think about what that means, like you really drill down on what that means, of what it is to be Bruce Wayne and to get out of bed, at 4 PM on a Tuesday, aching and sore and getting older and with a fractured, right index finger because you keep breaking it every time you have to punch somebody or every time you have to swing from something. And, there's Alfred going in, here is your really not that tasty protein drink that you're going to need to keep yourself going. And you have to now spend 3 or 4 hours wearing your Bruce Wayne mask and doing all the things that Bruce Wayne needs to do to pretend being Bruce Wayne, while at the same time maintaining everything that you're doing as Batman, while also worrying about all the things Batman is worrying about. And then you got to suit up and go out. God, there's got to be a night when he's like, I don't want to go on patrol. I don't. How many of us, are like, I don't want to go into work today. This is a choice, right? Who's going to say, Batman, you weren't there tonight? Well, really no one. I mean, you can do the story of, Batman, where were you? But you didn't know him anything. It's freaking GCPD's job. Why is he out there? How can you not go to that? You know what I mean? And then add to it all the cool factor, right? Ninja toys. Come on. Batman's cool. But I think that, I have very strong feelings about how I feel Batman should be portrayed.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. And and I think that element of self-sacrifice is at the core of the character. I think that's one of the things that you get, it's one of the things Marvel tapped into very early, and it's one of the things that DC seems to sometimes forget and then remind themselves of. These almost universally, the heroism of these characters starts from a place where they have decided not to do the other thing. They have taken up a responsibility that wasn't necessarily incumbent upon them to do. But they decided, I am going to do these things. I am going to use my abilities and powers to protect people. Right? I am going to try to right wrongs. That is a choice I made. And then they have committed to the choice. Right? This is why it's so important to me that Diana not be able to go back to Themyscira. Because if she can go home, she hasn't sacrificed anything. Right? There's no element of sacrifice in if she's just going, I'm just in man's world for a little while, but I'm going to go home. No, she has to give it up. She leaves with Steve. She has to leave willing and believing she will never see her mother again. She will never see her sisters again. She will never, ever be able to go home. She will be a stranger in a strange land forever. Forever. You grant her that heroism becomes very different, doesn't it? As opposed to, I'll be back next Tuesday. You want anything from the mall? I mean, it's so, yeah.
We're big fans.
Easy interview. I just keep talking.
Yeah, seriously,
so,
yeah. We're really big fans of Gotham Central. And we'd love to hear a little bit about the origin of that book and what it was like working with Ed Brubaker, we think you're both the dynamic duo of crime comics.
I think Ed's better, but that's very nice of you. Ed and I, the origin of this story, and I've told this elsewhere as well, there was a changing of the guard in the Bat Group. Denny O'Neil, who had been group editor, was going to step down, and Bob Schreck was coming in. And we had a meeting at Denny's home in Upper Nyack. And all the writers at that point, and there were a handful of us, and all the editors at that point, there were a handful of us, met at Denny's place, and we were talking about plans. And it was the first time I'd actually met Ed. And I was going to stay on Detective, and Ed was going to be doing Batman, and he'd been doing Robin. And I had been carrying around in my wallet a pie chart poll that Wizard had done like a year ago. How they used to do, you know, on the back pages of Wizard magazine, where they would have the price lists. They'd put like these little boxes of like, who is the best hero at, you know, Foursquare, and then they would have like a pie chart breakdown. And the pie chart for this was which Batman character needs their own series, and the overwhelming response was Gordon. And I had been wanting to do a cop book, and I think I had mentioned it. And Ed and I started talking, and he and I were both like, "Oh my God, we could do this!" And we both knew David Simon's book, "A Homicide a Year on the Killing Streets of Baltimore," and we both knew the show that had been written, that had come out of it. So we started pitching pretty hard for it, and it was an uphill battle. We had one argument being told, well, you need to call it Batman: Gotham Central. Is Batman going to be in it? How much will Batman be in it? Batman needs to be in it more. And we were always like, but the whole point is, this is the point of view of Batman from the cops, right? This is what it's like to be one of a handful of honest, good cops in Gotham, and what Batman looks like to you, and why he's kind of not your best friend. Why he makes your job much more difficult sometimes. And I remember we were at another summit, and Jeanette Kahn was still with the company, and we had been arguing about the title of the book. And Jeanette would come into these meetings every so often, and, you know, how's everything going? And she came in, and I think it was Carlin was editor-in-chief at that point, and he was like opposite us at the table. Jeanette comes in and said, I just wanted to see how it's going. And Ed and I were like, so hey, we have this idea, and we want to call it Gotham Central, and here's the pitch. And she said, that's great, go ahead. And I remember Carlin being like, I'm gonna kill you guys. But that's how we managed to get Batman out of the title. And then one of the things that happened was the book never sold well when it was in print, right? When it was coming out, people weren't reading it. It had really low readership. It was right on the cusp. But the people who were reading it loved it. I mean, they loved that book. And critically, it was being really well received.
And you won an Eisner for one of your story arcs, right?
Yeah. Michael and I won for the half a life arc. And yeah, I mean, you know, when DiDio became, when DiDio came in, he told me point blank, he said the book will run as long as you want it to run. And Ed at that point had gone to Marvel, and then Michael had gone to Marvel. And at that point I was sort of like, this was never just my show, and now it's become my show. It's the time to end it, you know. But yeah, you know, Ed and I we would get on the phone once a month, and we would have a call that would last about an hour, where we'd break down, if we were going to be co-writing, we would break down the issue. We'd break down the beats. We'd divvy them up, so each of us had 11 pages. We'd write them. We'd send them to each other, you know. And he was a dream to collaborate with. One of the easiest collaborations I've ever had in the industry. And the other thing I think was that we were really good about getting out of each other's way and letting each other do their own thing. You know, if he wanted to go down a certain alley, fine, because the book allowed us to do that. There were stories where we would come together. There were stories each of us would go off and tell the story we wanted, and then we'd come back together. So, yeah. The book does seem to have stood the test of time. Oh, yeah.
We're part of a Facebook comic book group with thousands of members, and Gotham Central Omnibus is always one of the most popular books that people always talk about. People love that book.
Yeah, it is a great book, and also doubles as a wonderful, wonderful piece of home defense.
Yeah.
It's a great doorstop.
It is a...
Oh, my God. You can stop a charging animal with that thing.
Well, we want to respect your time and close with some wrap-up lightning round questions. Jess, do you want to ask some of those that we have?
Well, sure. I like to collect. If you can see behind me, I have statues and
I do.
stuff on the walls and stuff. And I just wondered if there's anything that you collect, books, vinyl, anything, statue. Okay.
There would be books into vinyl and so on. I'm not sure if you can see the vinyl there.
I can see the vinyl. Yeah, nice.
There you go. That is steadily growing. Well, hang on. I seem to. There we go. I horked myself. We're oddly in this phase where my wife and I decided that we needed to start getting rid of stuff. So we're trying to I've been trying to cull.
You and Jess are in the same boat right now.
Yeah,
I think I have to have gotten rid of a good 150, 200 books in the last 3 months. Taking them to Powell's here in Portland and gotten. But the problem is when you go to Powell's, they say, "Do you want cash or do you want credit?" And I say, "I want credit." So then I come home, with more books.
So selling your drugs to buy other drugs.
Exactly. That is exactly it. I used to collect a lot of Star Wars stuff, but I don't really anymore. When I first started to make anything close to a proper living, I wanted to reward myself with all the things that I couldn't have when I was a kid. So there was a time when I had way too many action figures. Now most of those action figures belong to Fractions kids. Actually, I kind of was like, "Here you go, thud." So they like me because you can buy love. It turns out. But yeah, mostly these days I'm collecting vinyl. That's mostly what I'm doing. Is I'm buying records.
Nice.
I spend way too much time on Discogs.
Yeah.
Trying to track down soundtracks and so on.
Right. I've bought stuff from there many times myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a big jazz fan. I know you are as well.
Oh yeah.
Your Instagram page has been a lifesaver for me of just giving me different jazz albums to listen to. Do you have some favorite jazz musicians?
Yeah, well, Thelonious Monk is I love Monk. I love Monk.
He's my favorite too.
I can't. But I'm kind of boring in that regard. I mean, I love Monk. I love Coltrane. I love and people know them from, especially if you're of my generation, you know them from Schoolhouse Rock. Bobby Doro, Blossom Dearie, Dave Frischberg, and all three of them are vocalists. I actually got myself some Doro fairly recently, and they're albums that I haven't heard in years and years and years. And the sense memory of hearing these songs again has been really wonderful. I mean, look, man, I like sort of. I've been getting into Red Garland actually, and I have a huge soft spot for Vince Guaraldi. I just love his piano stuff, and the older I get, the less I can work to lyrics. So I just want music, and man, I've got a Guaraldi box set that's the definitive Vince Guaraldi, and it is. It's like six records, and I like listening to vinyl when I'm working because it makes me have to get up every so often and move, right? Because otherwise I'm just going to sit here the whole time like this and eventually turn into, the hunchback of Greg's basement. But when you're listening to vinyl, you have to get up and flip it. So.
Yeah, what I grew up with was vinyl, so I'm just continuing the vinyl habit, much to my wife's consternation. But
I think you and I are of a similar era, because I had all these records and then I lost them to CDs, and then I went back home and discovered that my brother had taken a bunch of them. But yeah, I've been slowly sort of restocking, and one of the things I suspect we'll do in this quarantine period is we've got 3-4 boxes of LPs up in the attic, and we need to sort of bring them down. And James Lucas Jones, who's publisher at Oni Press now, he's another vinyl head, and he and I went halvesies on an Okinoki record cleaner. If you know what this thing is, retail it sells for like $700, and we found one used, but it's literally a record vacuumer, so that you can put it on the platter and you can spin it and you can clean it. You can literally brush solution onto your vinyl, and then it's got an armature that you lower onto it, and it will suck it all up, right? And it's great for used vinyl or old vinyl. It cleans it really well.
We know what Justin's buying on eBay tonight.
I gotta tell you, man. And the thing is, we as James puts it, we co-parent it, right? And it was staying with me when lockdown happened, so it's here for the time being, and I am very much abusing that privilege. Like, I'll work for a couple hours and then be like, I'm going to clean 5 records, and I'll work for. So that's my break. Yeah.
Well, we love to talk about some of our favorite crime movies that pair well with the crime comics we review. What are some of your favorite crime movies?
Oh man, well,
maybe an underrated one that people need to know about. Yeah.
Heat immediately comes to mind. I love Heat. It's actually, I used to think nobody knew this movie, and now it turns out everybody does. I love The Friends of Eddie Coyle.
Oh, that is a great movie.
Yeah. And I had never, right? Yeah. And I had encountered it like literally at a late night movie thing and had never been able to track it down, and then found it. And for years had been certain that I was the only person who knew it. It turns out like anybody who loves crime films knows Eddie Coyle. What else? There is yet to be a good Westlake writing a Stark adaptation, in my opinion, which pisses me off.
Did you ever watch the director's cut of Payback?
I did not.
It's much better than the theatrical cut because Brian Helgeland, the whole movie was taken away from him, and it was a lot of stuff was reshot. And the director's cut isn't a fantastic movie, but it's much better than the theatrical cut. I will say that.
All right. I'll add that to the list. I'll tell you one that springs to mind. I love The Grifters.
Yeah, that's a good
I've never seen that one.
Grifters.
I'll add that to the list.
It's fantastic.
Who's in that one?
It's John Cusack. It's John Cusack, Annette Bening,
Angelica Houston.
There you go.
Amazing.
It is a fantastic adaptation of Thompson.
Westlake did the script too. Oh, I have to watch this. Awesome.
I'm trying to think what else. I'm sure we'll get off the call and I'll have like a half dozen.
Sure.
There's too many to count.
Well, and it depends. When you talk about crime movies, you're also talking about, well, how are you dividing the subgenre? Yeah. Are we talking about PI movies? Are we talking about caper films? Are we talking, right? I mean,
we've been very flexible with our crime comics because almost every comic has a crime in it. So by definition, it's all crime comics.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's like, well, and technically, what defines a private eye versus a detective? So, yeah, I actually, and it's not a great movie. I love The Hot Rock, but I love the novel. I mean, I love Westlake's Dortmunders, and I can watch Robert Redford do just about anything. But watching him be a failure of a thief is always a delight. I suppose as far as crime, movies go, The Sting. I love The Sting.
Yeah.
All right. But do we call that? Is that a caper? Or is that a crime? Right. And then, look, I hit the obvious ones: the Maltese Falcon, the Bogart, the Big Sleep, the Howard Hawks' Big Sleep, Double Indemnity. I mean, all of the, Postman only, Always Rings Twice. We can go down that list. And then, depending, Yeah, Great Mystery, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. You know,
You're giving me a lot of things on my list right now that I've never watched, so this is great.
I've been watching a lot of westerns again lately. I sort of dove back into the western, and found I guess it was done several years ago, but there was a new edit of Once Upon a Time in the West, Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, that I found, and that has always been one of my favorite movies. It's difficult in places, but I'd never seen this edit, and it restored some stuff and it cut some stuff out, and it is like, you know, in keeping with all your faves are problematic. It is far and away the best version of the movie, and wildly problematic in places. like, oh my gosh, that's even more problematic than the other versions. Wow. But damn, I love that movie. So,
did you ever watch the Godless miniseries on Netflix? That was a great western.
No.
It's written and directed by Scott Frank, who did Get Shorty, Out of Sight, Look Out. That's a fantastic western. It's mainly about women.
Yeah, I had seen something about it, and I haven't watched it yet. All right, so that's going on my list. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, good. That sounds like it's right up your alley. Strong, capable women in a western.
Yeah, twist my damn arm.
No. Well, Jess, do you have other questions to wrap up? Or?
I don't. Is there a place your fans can find you on social media that?
I hate social media, and I think it is leading inevitably to the destruction of our civilization. So, and I'm not joking. I'm on Instagram at Rucka Writer, but Lazarus, in the back of the issues of Lazarus, we have a link to our Discord server. And we maintain a Discord server that is ostensibly a Lazarus server, but it is actually there are forums for discussing Lazarus, discussing Lois, for discussing other things people are reading, other comics, for sharing art, for talking about movies, for sharing the news, just for generally chatting. And I think we've got something like 250, 300 people now who have joined it. They are never all on at the same time. We've got some regulars, and it's pretty fun. I'm pretty active there. And the nice thing about Discord is it allows for, like this, it allows for some voice communication. So we're actually going to be doing, especially again, given the self-quarantining that's going on for a lot of people, we're gonna do sort of a happy hour chat time this Saturday, and I want to say 6 Pacific or so on. So, you know, it's real easy to find the link to it. If people want to join us, they're welcome. We do seem to have this interesting problem. People will join, and you get shunted into the new user forum, and you have to type a command that it tells you to type when you arrive. And if you don't type this command, you don't get access to the other stuff. It's basically just saying, yes, I have registered. I'm here. I will now go read your forum rules. And a lot of people don't seem to figure out that they need to type this. And then they're like, oh, gosh, nothing's going on here. It's like, that's because you're literally standing in the doorway. And everybody is in the living room. So you need to just come in, take off your boots, come on in. So that's my warning as far as that goes.
But if you want to see great jazz recommendations and pictures of Greg's really cool dog, then you should follow.
Yes, my dog. You see my dog a lot. Yeah.
Yes. That's the best thing. That's my favorite thing on Instagram is following dog people.
Yeah. Yeah. Marlo's a good dog.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you enough for
my pleasure, gentlemen.
For your time. I know it's valuable, and I appreciate your loaning it to us for this hour and a half. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating, and you were a great interview, and we're both just huge fans of yours, and we can't thank you enough for appearing. So thank you so much, and continued good success to you.
You know, thank you guys very much for having me and for being patient as we arrange this. And hopefully we'll get to talk again soon. All right.
Great.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I think Jess cut himself off here.
That's all right. I am going to leave the studio. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Greg.
And You guys say, oh yeah, and over your shoulder I see the Breaking Bad poster now. It's like, yeah, there's another great piece of crime work.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
All right, man. You take care.
See you, Greg.
Cheers. Bye.
Yeah. All right, guys. So Jess has left, so I'm going to close this show out. Please give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell for future videos. All right, guys. Peace and love. Have a great day.